So you never know until you try to send it whether it's going to get bounced. Email is also inherently insecure. There are ways of password and encrypting files before you send them, but email is plain text. And so if you're actually trying to distribute confidential files or files that you wouldn't want shared with somebody else, then it's totally out of your control. Once it's in somebody's email, it might have been intercepted or hacked on the way in. It's anybody who has access to that email server has access to those files. And that person may just go ahead and forward that thing right on to somebody else, and you have no control over what happened with the information. File sharing, and one of its biggest advantages or uses is sharing files with yourself. You may have a computer at home, you may have an office desktop, you might have a laptop and or a tablet computer that you want just to have access to the same files. And for many people, file sharing basically in some ways has replaced their they don't think of the hard drive on their local computer as their main storage. That just happens to be where the file is at this moment. They think of file sharing services, of something up in the cloud, as being their primary hard drive. And that can be a very good thing. I'll speak to that from personal experience. And you may just have, concerns about how you're sharing the files in this way. You may want control over, you may want to implement a file sharing system that has access control. You may want to centralize maintenance. You may have compliance requirements. And you may want folks to be able to share and actually collaborate on files, so that if somebody actually says, it has comments, if this is a file you're sending out for review or for feedback, you may want people to actually be able to converse and to share more than just the file itself, but actually something about the content, express an opinion, make a recommendation or a change. All these are real reasons to implement a file sharing system. So we love file sharing. Personally, as a user, I use file sharing every single day. It is key and critical to the way that I work, because I have different machines in different places and even on different platforms. So I sync files with multiple devices. I'm constantly sending people links to files from tablets, even from and looking at my files. Someone says that they've sent me something or I need to refer to something in a file, I can look it up on my phone very, very quickly, or from my tablet. And if I've got a large file or a folder that I want to send off to somebody, I can do a right-click on it, send them a link. The link that is in the email that I send them always goes through, and they can just click on that and view it online or download it as they need it without email restrictions or having to set up FTP sites or move a file into a special location. It's really straightforward. So at this point, file sharing, I don't want to say it's the facts of the current decade, but in some ways it is. It is just becoming constant, where people say, great, go ahead and send me it's almost an assume, could you send me a link to this file as a way of getting information around. And you need this as to be part of your business IT plan and policy as regards to how you want your users to be, your employees to be able to share with each other and with vendors and customers, but you just need to be smart about how you do it and make sure that the solution that you choose, or what you allow people to do with regards to file sharing, fits within the needs of your company or your organization. So questions, the first thing you need to start with when you're talking about file sharing services is basically to say, with whom are you wishing to share and how often does this happen? So are you just looking for something for yourself or for your individual coworkers just so they can work more than one place? Are you looking to share with your coworkers who are maybe on or not on your network, because maybe they're traveling around? Are you trying to share project documents? Are you trying to create manuals, guides, videos, different libraries? Are you trying to create a library that's sort of a standardized set of documents that people can look up and sort of reference? Maybe their procedures guides, maybe their health forms, maybe their vacation requests, things like that. Or are you also trying to share with outside parties, customers, vendors, working on distributing forms, product literature? Maybe you have some intellectual property as a library. Maybe there's confidential work process product. Maybe you're in the medical industry and you need to send documents and forms. Maybe you're creating tax returns. Or maybe it's just designs, files, PDFs that you're working with a client on, and you want an easy way for them to see a draft of something, give you feedback, and get it back. Each one of these things, and you may say, yeah, I want to do all three. which is great, but you just need to think through, okay, who do we need to share with, and how often is this going to be? Is this sort of a one-off thing? Occasionally somebody will ask for a file and I'll just shoot it to them? Or is this a regular thing where we have standard documents that we want new clients to receive, but they're too big to send them via email? So thing about file sharing is that if you are looking for something beyond the sharing of files, if you need project management, commercial digital distribution, some sort of digital work product or something that you are selling, if you're looking specifically for a paperless office, if you're looking for a workflow solution so that person A fills out, sent the file, and then person B submits it and person C approves it, and then it goes for processing to person D, or if you're just looking for some sort of vertical business management system, file sharing is probably not what you want, or you don't want to start with file sharing, because any good project management, paperless office, workflow business management system should have some sort of file sharing capability in it. Now, when I say should have, I would say that would be an expectation of someone who looks at software in 2015. If the product that you're using, if the thing that you're running your business on was written pre-2010, and obviously a lot of it was, and you're still on it, then file sharing might not be built in. Totally possible. File sharing may be part of the solution, and you could implement a simple file sharing system to address that need. But if you're looking for a brand new system now to do project management or workflow, file sharing probably should be in there, and I would look to your vertical application first to make sure that it does or does not have file sharing capabilities. And then if it doesn't, you can sort of figure out where it, or if it does anything, or if it partially addresses the needs, and then bring on a supplemental file sharing system to cover what it can't do. So before we get into the details of file sharing solutions and options, we're going to talk a little bit about file servers versus file sharing, because they are not the same thing. And they're just not the same thing. We'll go forward with that. So just for a brief reminder, a dip back into the archaic days of 2001 and 1985 and 1999. File servers. So file servers, the only people on a file server are those that are connected to them via hard cable, Wi-Fi, or VPN. You've got large hard drives with a low cost per megabyte, very fast connections, 100 megabits, gigabit connections these days. And the file server is running, this is important, a file server operating system. It was designed to have multiple users accessing files on the server directly via shared drives and folders. You've got folder level security, some fairly high, a lot of options. Can read, can write, can edit, can delete, can rename, all can set other permissions. There's a long list of permissions that can be set on file servers by user or by group. And there's a thing called file locking, which if a user has a file open and their application locks that file, nobody else can use it or change it. So that helps you cut down on version or overwriting issues. Also, the programs that you use to access things on file server are generally running right on your computer. So you use Excel to open a file that is on the file server. The file server is just an extension of your hard drive. And because it's centralized, anybody else that tries to open that copy of that spreadsheet is going to get a message saying that it's read-only or it's locked, or they'll get some notification. You accessing files via a path and a name, and those, again, the applications that you're running are directly on the workstation. And actually, I missed one point. The notion of connecting to a file server is built into your workstation's operating system. It's just core in the same code that boots it from scratch, that there are shares, and here how shares are accessed via Wi-Fi or via cable, and it's just all designed to work together with a common understanding of how it goes. how this is supposed to work. So that's your basic file server primer. Web servers are a different thing. So A, they're open to the world. If they're sitting on the internet, generally speaking, if it's a public file sharing system or a commercially owned company, anybody can go to that website and try to log into it. Also, very important, we're talking about slower connections, anywhere from 1 megabit per second to 50 megabits per second. And some people will say, oh yeah, but I've got a 100 megabit per second connection from Comcast. Yeah, and that's on a good day when nobody else is really using it and it's not 4 p.m. Personally, as a Comcast user, I see my internet download speed vary anywhere from 10 to 80 megabits per second. 80 being a good day. I'm paying for 100. But my upload speed is only, that can vary from 1 to 10. So you've got asymmetric upload and download speeds. Web servers, it's somebody else's computer. You are paying a higher cost per megabyte for storage. Also, very important, you're actually accessing this web server, and all file sharing services at some level are all web servers. They're all web servers with a particular HTML application that's running, that's controlling the access to the files. And so you're basically using a web browser to get to your files rather than the core features of the operating system. So it's going through a completely different level of access to get to these files. You're also connecting via a URL. You bring up a file in DROPBOX or Google or any of these services from the web interface. They're all stored on a web server, and everything's done by a universal reference lookup, which is what URL stands for. And you're not using technically a file name and a path. It's not, drive s shared : docs / something else. It may look that way to you, but ultimately it's stored on a web server that you're referenced to, that internally is being referenced or directly via a URL. And then the last thing is, when you're looking at a file via a web server or web server / file share service, you're looking at it through a web browser. And you're either going to just open it, look at it, and close it. And so again, the software that's running closest to you is your web browser, whether it's Safari or whether it's Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox. It's through the web browser. You may have the option to open and edit that document via some sort of a web-based application like Word Online or Excel Online or Google Sheet or Google Doc. But again, you're running it through a web browser. So that application is going to perform differently than running Word or Excel on your desktop machine. And if you actually want to run it in your local copy of Word, you have to download it. It has to be downloaded to your disk. You have to say where you want it to go, and then you can edit it. And the question is then, it's got to get uploaded back to your share to make it work. So obviously, file share services, many of you already know, I'm sure, that there's something called local sync agents or local sync folders, which try to make this transparent. But ultimately, you are saving your files and synchronizing files to a web server that has just different properties than a file server. So, for example, and this will come up later, in file servers and on web servers, you have very similar file name max lengths. So on a file server, and I'm talking about NTFS, the limit is about 250. On a Unix file server, almost all web servers are running a Unix or Linux operating system. The max file name is 255. No big deal. The path on a file server can be 32,000 characters long. That's the shared / public / mydocs / Nims / 1982 / financial statement / may / all that path leading up to the file name can be 32,000 characters long, which is fabulous. On a web browser, your maximum URL length, oops, I misspelled URL, look at that. Your maximum URL length is 2,000 characters, and that number varies depending on what browser you're using. It's actually the browser that determines the maximum URL length. So Chrome's browser or URL length is a little smaller than Internet Explorer's. And so you may find that certain paths and certain locations just don't translate because it's just not the exact same thing. And then here's the big gotcha. On Windows file servers, NTFS file servers, there are something called reserved characters. Bracket out, bracket in, colon, quotation mark, left and right slash, pipe, question mark, parens, and asterisks are not supposed to be used in your file name because those reserved characters actually mean something to the operating system. You'll notice that period is not in that list. Period means something, but Windows operating systems will let you put more than one period in. They always add a period to the end generally. That is the period and then the file type. But you can have a period other places in the document, and Windows just deals with it. On a web server, you have those same reserved characters, plus period, percent, exclamation point, ampersand, and the equal sign. So if you tried on a web server to save a file with 2 periods in it, it will tell you it can't do it because you're not supposed to use a period at all. The operating system will tell you where the period goes. You can't, I couldn't save a file called Nims ampersand associates on a web server because it's going to tell me that's an illegal character. Plus, there's a whole nother set of unsafe characters on web servers. So the hash, open and close braces, caret, tilde, open and close brackets, and apostrophe. They're not illegal in the operating system, and you can save them as such. But these characters are called unsafe characters because they are used in HTML. So open and close bracket is used in the syntax of HTML for loading and displaying and manipulating web content. And if it's trying to do something with a file that has an open and close bracket in it, open or close bracket in it, it can get confused and do something wrong. So they're considered unsafe. Plus, file names on web servers are not supposed to have leading spaces or trailing spaces. So a space at the front of the name is technically legal under Windows. You can save a file that way, but you can't on a web server. Now some of you that are already using file services are saying, hey, but you know, I've got files out there that have exclamation points in their title, or maybe they have open and close parentheses in the title, and I'm already using DROPBOX and it's synchronizing just fine. So what are you telling me, Pat? What's the problem here? Well, the problem is that web services get around this by, I don't want to say cheating, that's not the right word. Web services, file sharing services to different degrees get around this by storing your file with an actual different name. They use URL shortening, they use character substitution. You know, if you've ever tried to download a file, or you've ever opened a file via a web browser that had spaces in it, you'll notice, and sometimes it happens when you download and save the file, that the file name, instead of there being an actual space in your browser search bar, you'll see %20. %20 means space. And that's where those things show up. So there'll be a space, a %20, a %32. So they will use character substitution, file encapsulation. They'll use lots of different things to basically try to bridge the differences between your PC or Mac, desktop, or file server operating system requirements and the way stricter requirements that web servers have. And it's just important to know that if you actually want to use a file sharing service and you want it to go as smoothly as possible, this is a best practice tip. Don't use reserved characters. Don't call something 2014 space dash space proposal. Call it 2014 dash proposal. Take out spaces. Don't use these additional reserved characters that are trouble for web browsers and potentially can cause additional problems. So all of that was basically to come around to the point that file serving is not the same thing as file sharing. And we've talked to a number of clients. We hear from clients who tell us, hey, I want to move my file server to the cloud, and I want to get DROPBOX. Okay, so the first part is fine. We understand wanting to move file servers to the cloud. We think that that's generally speaking a pretty good thing. However, Dropbox is not a file serving service. It's a file sharing service. And as I just sort of enumerated before, they're not exactly the same thing. There absolutely are ways to move file servers to the cloud. And we use products or services from Amazon and Microsoft, AWS, or Microsoft Azure services, where you can actually have your file server in the cloud with a drive mapped, if you want to, as Drive S. It will work exactly the same as you're used to with all the advantages of a file server operating system. But Dropbox doesn't do that. Neither does Google, neither does HIGHTAIL. File sharing and file services file serving are definitely not the same thing. So we just sort of need to clarify that. Now, can some companies replace file servers and go to a file sharing option instead, and so they actually stop having a file server? The short answer is yes. Depending on your requirements, your size, the number of documents that we're talking about, yeah, it's possible, especially for very small companies with 3 to 5 people, less than 10 people. File sharing might suffice, but again, you're not going to get the same thing. They are not apples to apples in terms of their features. All right, so file sharing. Good news and bad news. Here are some good things that you should be aware of, both on the good side and the bad news with regards to file sharing. A, it's easy to set up. Simple credit card, a recurring charge, boom, you're done. The sync engines that file sharing services use, so basically all the file sharing services do this. You can define a portion of your hard drive, a specific folder, and you say, hey, anything that's in this folder, synchronized to the cloud. So I'm just going to open it up directly in Windows Explorer or the Mac Finder, and I'm just going to edit in my local copy of Word, and I'm going to save it, and I never have to actually go to the Dropbox or the Google Drive website. And it works, and that actually works, and it's a great thing. And then on a different computer, you can install the sync software, and you set up your username and your password, and you can say, hey, everything that's in that folder that's on the web, I also want synchronized down to my home computer. So you edit something on your local computer, you save it. Well before you get home, like typically within a couple of seconds, if your computer at home is on, it's been updated to the exact same version of that file. And you never even deal with many people never even deal with the website service of these things. So these sync engines are great. It's super easy to share folders and files with other users. Again, if you are using the local sync engine, you can just right-click in Windows Explorer and say share link, and it copies the link to your clipboard, and you can start an email to somebody and just paste. Here's the link to that file. Let me know what you think. Paste it in, send the email. They get the link. They click. It opens in a web page, and there you go. There are some nice collaboration options where people can actually comment. You can share the same file with multiple people and they can comment on it. There are some nice file restore and recovery options. Most all these services will keep multiple versions of a file, better than probably your PC operating system does. In some cases it's unlimited, and in the most restrictive case it's 30 days. And these things are not expensive. They're anywhere from free to $15 per month per user. That's the basic range of the cost. So they're not terribly expensive, especially given the productivity, because you don't have to copy anything from from your local server to a USB drive. You don't have to get a VPN connection. When you're working locally and you're working fast. So if you have a laptop that's synchronizing, you can just make sure that it's been on at some point during the day, close it up, get on a plane, work on it, get to the hotel, turn it on, and it's going to update everything back on your desktop computer. Just bang, and you don't even have to think about it. It's really quite nice. Bad news. There's always a downside, right? One is performance. Every time your PC or your Mac starts up and this program loads, it's going to go look at the files on your PC and compare them to the files that you've said to synchronize on the cloud, and it's going to look for differences, and like it should, and it's going to synchronize all those files that are different. Now, if we're talking about 100 files, that's no big deal. Bang, it's done. If we're talking about 50,000 files or a terabyte of data, you may very well notice that for the first 15 minutes after you've started your PC and you've logged in, that things are really slow till it catches up and makes sure, okay, yeah, everything's indexed, and we have no conflicts. It also is chewing up your internet bandwidth. These file sharing services, basically every time you save something to disk, if you're typing in Word and you haven't saved it, nothing's happened. But as soon as you save it to disk, these sync agents see that you've saved something and they send it up even if you're still editing. So if you save a lot, you're chewing up internet bandwidth. And if it's a big file, it could be sending the entire file. Some of these things are incremental, but most of these things actually just resend the whole file to overwrite to create a new version or to overwrite the existing version that's there. Okay, so there you go. That's fine. And maybe you have a small amount of data on these servers. So maybe you only have 10 gigabytes of data because you've just synchronized your photos and your current projects. Great, 10 gigabytes. So what then happens when you've got 10 people in your company and they're all synchronizing 10 gigabytes every morning? Yeah, everyone is going to notice that, and while it's synchronized in the background and you're trying to look up something on the web or even just wondering where's my email, why is my email coming and going so slowly, it's like, oh yeah, everybody's synchronizing. You have these issues with bad news, you have these issues with file names and path names. These services generally do a good job of, like I said before, of dealing with the inconsistencies or the different rules between web servers and file servers for storing, but they are not perfect. And in every service, I have seen some sort of sync error where it said, couldn't sync that file, don't know why. Sometimes it says don't know why. Sometimes it tells you exactly why. It'll say, yep, there's a leading space on this file, can't sync it. But it is something you have to be aware of, and the more that you follow the rules about file naming, the standard Unix file naming web conventions, and avoid those special characters in your file names, then you have less of a problem. Sync errors and sync conflicts. So web servers don't really lock files the way that file servers do. Web servers were designed so that you could have a single document, a web page, an HTML page, and have 40,000 people access it. And if you, that's kind of the point, right? And if you have write access to that file, a web server will allow multiple people to write and overwrite that file, and it all depends on how good the software is in terms of dealing with multiple writes to the same file. Now, in Microsoft Office Online and in Google Docs, that's a good thing because actually people can edit the same file and be on the same spreadsheet at the same time. It's an amazing thing. But if you're editing an Excel file local on your PC and you've shared a folder with another user who is also working in Excel on their local PC and you're both synchronizing the file via your local PC to the web share, then you could both have the file open, not know it, and you'll end up with two versions of the file. And then I'll say something, I typically see something like, conflicted copy from Pat's PC and conflicted copy from Arlene's PC. And then it's like, oh, well, which version is the real one? Which version is the current? And then if you've got lots of people editing files, that can be a problem. And you'll end up with sync conflicts and or errors. Also, not all files sync well. Any kind of database, you do not want to sync. Because as I said, these systems update data as soon as they see some data saved to the disk. And it's updating the entire file. So if you happen to be using QuickBooks, QuickBooks puts everything in a DB file. And so even if you just change one record, it's overwriting the whole thing. And so a customer record and a GL record and an AP record, vendor record, are all part of the same file. And these synchronization services can't tell the difference. So if you are in invoicing and somebody else is in accounts payable, you're constantly messing each other up by overwriting data. And the other thing to know, and this is not a bad thing, but it just is, file sharing services are not a backup service. They will keep versions of files, but there's nothing in a file sharing service that says put my disk back the way that it was. You do this on a file-by-file basis, basically. Now, there are online backup services like CrashPlan and many others that do allow you to share files as part of their feature set. And there's some gray area in between here. But we'll be talking today mainly about things that are designed as file sharing services primarily. Bad news number 2. If you share a link with somebody and you then move that file or rename that file, that link just broke. It's no good, and you're going to have to resend it to whoever you sent it to before. If it's an important shared document and someone changes it from version 1 to version 2, and it's your company policy page or it's the page that clients are instructed to look at for details, then all of their links just broke, and you're going to have to resend it. It's all based on the exact file name. And the other things now is maintenance and security. Most of these products have very simplistic security. Users with read access can generally download files. They can generally save those files to their own hard drive and do anything they want with them. They can, if they have edit access, edit also means delete. In most file sharing systems, not all, but in most file sharing systems, if they can delete, if they have edit access, they can delete. If you share a folder with somebody that has subfolders, they can make the subfolders go away too. Generally speaking, that's something, if that's important to you, you need to know how that works and what systems do it and what don't do it. Users also generally can share links without permission. So you can share a file with somebody and they can forward it to your competitor to see if they can give you a better quote or give them a better quote. They can, if they are, they can forward them on to someone that might be looking for, they could forward something to someone looking for a job, and that person looking for the job could go to someplace else and say, hey, look, I got this. So once you've shared something, most of these systems, it's gone. And it's on the honor system is what the person that you shared it with does with it. Very little administrator oversight. It varies between systems, but most systems, very little administrator oversight. And again, most of these systems, things are shared, but they're not controlled. You might as well, it's not that, technologically it's different, but again, it's not that different than taking a bunch of files, putting it on a USB drive, and handing it to somebody, or burning it to a CD and handing it to them. So those are things you have to keep in mind. So when you're choosing or looking at file sharing solutions, know that there are basically 3 types of plans for almost all these services. There's a free, which gives you a little bit of disk space, typically lower bandwidth. When they see your account is logging in, they slow down how fast you sync. You do not get the same performance as the professional or the business plan users. And those accounts are owned by whoever signed up for them. They are not owned by your company. They are owned by whoever's email and password logs in and creates that plan. Professional plans, typically you get between 1 and 2 terabytes of storage. You're going to get faster upload and download. It works great for self-employed people. You get a couple of extra features. But again, personal and / professional plans are owned by the user who has that. It doesn't matter what credit card they're using. They could be using a business credit card, but it's their name and whatever password they happened to create, and you don't know whether or not they're synchronizing data from their desktop PC to their laptop, to their mom's, to their second job. They can log in and create as many sync points as they want and share that data to as many computers or send those links to anybody they want. You have no control over that. Then there are business plans. Business plans typically get unlimited storage per user. Not always, but many of them do. You get a lot more in terms of advanced features where there's actually an administrator, a password with a user password, an administrator password for all the accounts under your business umbrella, kind of like a business cell phone plan, where you can add users, you can turn users off, you can change their passwords, you can see how much data they're using, and set some permissions for those users about what they can do and can't do, and those accounts are owned by the business. So depending on the size of the company, business plans, if you want control over your data, at least have some semblance of at least being able to turn somebody's account off if they should leave your employee, then that's a good thing. If someone has a professional or a free plan under their own name, and they leave your company for whatever reason, sure, you can take their workstation off of the network or change the user login or disable the the synchronization engine. But anything that they already synced to their Dropbox or their Google Drive stays there. And they have full access to it to do whatever they want. And because it's under their username and password, you basically have no recourse with Dropbox or Google or Microsoft to say, hey, that's my data. They're going to say, well, call that person and see if you can work it out. Good luck with that. Sharing and access. You will want to know, when you're looking at these plans, what's the max file size? Every system has a maximum file size that they can handle based on the web operating system and the policies of the company. They will have the max storage that you can have and throughput, and some systems have max bandwidth. You can't upload more than 20 gigabytes a day, and then we start throttling you back. A lot of companies want something called, as a feature, want a system that has a feature called a file drop. Sometimes your clients need to give you files, and you just want to be able to say, hey, put this file here. Here's a link. Click on this. It'll go to a web page and let you upload a file to me. That's called a file drop. Not all these systems has it. It all depends. Again, it goes back to that question of who are you sharing with, and do they need to get something back to you. Some systems have built-in e-signature features so that you can send somebody a link, and built into the process, when they click on that link, the document comes up and it says, do you want to sign this now? And they can click on that. It does a digital signature, puts it back into your file share, and you get notified that they just signed off. Some systems have workspaces, so you can actually organize projects or files around, you can organize files around projects. Obviously, some of these have application suites, whether it's the Microsoft suite or the Google suite. That may or may not be important to you. It's not specifically important for file sharing, but it does have something to do with collaboration. And some of these systems allow you to custom brand so that your customer, your user, your employees are seeing your logo and not their logo, and it just looks a little more professional for those of us who, who care about how stuff looks like. Security features. The top two of these, well, the top one pretty much everybody is at. It wasn't true once upon a time, but almost everybody is using SSL encrypted transfers and encrypted files. Two-step authentication is a nice thing to have. Someone goes to log in, and they enter a password, and then their phone beeps. And they just got a text with a code that they have to enter into the computer to make sure that not only do you know the username and the password, but you actually have their cell phone. And so that makes me feel a little more confident that you are who I think you are. It's a nice feature. Active Directory integration is nice, so that your username for your network and password is the exact same for getting onto the file service. Some of these systems have client users, so you can actually say to your client, go to our website and log in. Here's your username and password on our website. And that's going to grant you certain rights. Remote wipe is a very important on a business system. Remote wipe lets you, Bill has been terminated. You look at his file shares. He has 4 devices currently synchronizing, and you can say, kill them all. You have to be a little careful. Sometimes, in the case of cell phones, remote wipe actually wipes the cell phone entirely. So if they had personal information, photos, contacts, etc., it's gone. And if that was a personal cell phone that you're wiping, that could get you into trouble. Others of these just wipe the sync, and it's not quite so messy. Password protecting files. Obviously, when you're working in something like an Excel or Word, you can save something and password protect it, but we know that that's a pain. So some of these systems have services where or have a feature where you can, when you share a file, as you are sharing it, add an additional password so that the person who's receiving the share link has to know that password and able to get into the file. You don't have to know the password to open it and edit it. You can open it and edit it all day long and not have to unlock it every time. They just need the password to get into it. Compliance support. Almost all of these file services are SOX and HIPAA compliant. There are a couple of exceptions, but almost all of them are. Compliance support, though, to me means they actually do things that help you stay in compliance, like you can designate certain kinds of files that can't be shared, or certain practices that would get you in trouble if you actually did that. So it's one thing to be HIPAA compliant, it's another thing to stay HIPAA compliant and actually have best practices. So some systems say if you try to turn on a feature and you've identified yourself as a SOX account or as a HIPAA account, they'll say, oh, you can't do that because you're SOX, sorry. And virus scanning. I would definitely want a system that had virus scanning. People are going to be uploading, maybe sharing files with me. Maybe my home computer got infected, and I don't want to. If even yourself gets infected with a virus on one system, and then it's uploaded to the SharePoint, to the sync, then every other computer that you are synchronizing with has that same file on it, and the next time you open it, bang, good luck. So virus scanning is something that should be in every system. File tracking purposes, keeping versions, having audit logs, notifications. Some of these systems will tell you when somebody has received an invitation to share a file. Some of these systems will tell you when somebody has downloaded the file. Some of them will tell you when they've uploaded the file. Having stronger, more flexible folder permissions. Being able to set user storage limits. Maybe there's an employee that, they really only need 10 gigabytes of data, and why would I want them to have 4 terabytes? That's kind of a nice thing to have. So, and I talked before about file locking. Most of these systems, some of these systems allow you to lock files. Others let you check in and check out files, and so basically checking out a file prevents it from being edited. And others, nobody can change that file until you check it back in. A lot of people think this is a pain, but in a web-based operating system, you don't really have file locking the way that you think about it on a file server. So we got lots of people to choose from. There are so many of these systems out there, it is ridiculous. So we're going to talk about 5. Basically Drop, Google, HIGHTAIL, OneDrive, SharePoint, and ShareFile, and then we'll touch a little bit on SharePoint. So DROPBOX. DROPBOX is great. They were the first, in my experience, they are the fastest synchronization, like 2-3 seconds before it's on the remote PC. Not just up to the server, but just up and down. It's a very nice, easy to use user interface, very strong handling of long file names and paths. They now have Office 365 integration. So to be clear on that, you don't get Office 365 with DROPBOX. But if you have Office 365, an Office 365 account, either personal or business, if you open a Word or Excel file, DROPBOX will say, "Hey, do you want to open this in Word or Excel?" And it will open that file in that in that application, and then save it back to DROPBOX for you automatically. So you still have to have your own license with Microsoft, but it just makes it really easy. And they've got commenting now, commenting on files, which is nice. You can share comments. People can talk to you about or give you feedback on what they think about a file. Bad news. No control over shared links. You share a link with somebody, they can forward it to anybody they want. So you don't always know who's looking at their your files. And again, users with edit rights can delete files and subfolders from that share if you let them. Or I'm sorry, if you let them. Generally speaking, they can't. So I've had folders that I shared with somebody, and I came back a month later, and they were gone. And it turned out that a user that I had shared a folder with was done with the project, and they thought, yeah, I'm just going to delete this because I don't need these files anymore. There's a different thing they're supposed to do, which is to unsubscribe from that folder, but the user didn't realize that. And I understand how they thought that. Well, Pat shared this file, I'm done with it, so I'm going to take it off my system. Yeah, well, it took it off of my system too. Quirky thing about DROPBOX, if someone shares with something with you, that counts against your storage access. So if I have a 1 terabyte account and I'm almost full, and someone shares with me another 500 gigabytes of data, I might have to have a 1.5 gigabyte or a 2 terabyte max account to handle it. And DROPBOX does have a remote wipe, but it's only in the business version. Google Drive. Google Drive has reliable syncing. In my experience, it's not quite as reliable as DROPBOX. I get a few more errors here and there. It's also a little bit slower, is my experience. This thing about Google Drive is it's integrated with Google Apps. And Google Apps, I used to poo-poo them. I still would rather be working in Word and Excel, but I don't mind working in Google Sheet or Google Doc when I have to. Interesting thing here, things that are actually documents that are actually created with a Google app. So Google Docs, Google Sheet, their presentation program, Gmail. Actually, I take that back as a different thing. As long as the document was created with a Google app, it does not count against your drive storage quota. Bad news. Similar to Dropbox, users with edit rights can delete files and subfolders. Cons, hey, if you don't like Google Apps, it gets a little tricky because every time you try to open a file online, it's going to want to convert it to, so let's say you have an Excel file in your G drive, you go to open it online, it's going to want to open it in Google Sheet and convert it, which is not always the greatest thing. There's no commenting in Google Drive. And there's no team sites. Now Google has a different thing, Google Groups, for dealing with team stuff, but it's not integrated with the file system. So you're not putting comments directly on files. Simple file permissions, as I said before, a little slower than Dropbox. And this is a weird thing, and maybe nobody else cares about this, but if you have large amounts of files on Google Drive, maybe you're archiving stuff, just so it's in the webs for easy access, you can only download a file, 2 gigabytes of files at a time from the web interface. If you want to download a large archive of photographs or something like that, it will only give you 2 gigabytes at a time, and if you want more than that, you actually have to sync those files to your desktop and use the desktop engine. You can't do it from the web interface. OneDrive, and I'm going to say this says OneDrive Personal just to help me keep track. So there's 2 products. There is OneDrive, and then there is OneDrive for Business. Technically, there is nothing called OneDrive Personal. Just helps me keep track of it. So good news about OneDrive is that it's included with Office 365 Home. I think it's basically integrated with MS Office and built into Windows 10 at this point. Simple and easy to use, got a nice browser interface, and it pretty much has almost all the same features as Dropbox and G Drive, Google Drive. And I wish it was better. But I have to say, I use OneDrive as little as possible. A couple of reasons. A, to me, it's the slowest sync client. It takes 2 to 3 times as long as Google, which takes longer than Dropbox to actually upload files. Not as good support. So OneDrive will tell me it can't sync a file because it's got a space at the beginning of the file name. And I don't as a regular basis save file names starting with a space, but maybe there was a cut and paste error, or it was just a minor keyboard error, and so you synchronize a lot of stuff, and then you have a lot of files. Sometimes there's a problem with a file name, but the same file that'll sync with Dropbox, OneDrive will tell me go fix that before it can sync that. So I get more sync errors, even beyond the space issue. And one thing to be aware of is that OneDrive Business is a substantially different program than OneDrive. I wish they didn't have the same name because they're really not quite the same thing. HIGHTAIL. So many of you may not know HIGHTAIL. HIGHTAIL used to be called YouSendIt. YouSendIt was one of the very first pure file sharing applications. So people who get majority of the users in the world are on Dropbox or on Google Drive. Another OneDrive is coming up. Not so many people know HIGHTAIL. Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive, their primary usage is by people who want to synchronize their files to multiple machines and occasionally send links. HIGHTAIL is for people who want to share files with other people. So HIGHTAIL comes with unlimited data storage, advanced commenting. You can actually, if you're looking at an image or a Word doc, you can actually highlight the part that you want to comment on, draw a box around it, and say this sentence should say this, without having to go into the document. You get notifications when people download stuff or upload stuff. You have specific client logins, so that in OneDrive and Google Drive and Dropbox, if you want to verify that the person who is getting the file, who gets this link, it actually is the person, you've sent it to Pat Nims. If you want to verify that Pat Nims really got that, then I have to use a Google account or a Dropbox account or a Microsoft account to log in to verify that I'm the right person. And so, you know, most everybody has a Google account. Not everybody has a Dropbox account or a Microsoft account. So it kind of is to me, a little less professional than saying, hey, here's your username and login to get into our system to download files. HIGHTAIL has file drops. So, and every user has their own file drop. So I can send somebody an email that says, hey, when you get that thing done, you want to give it to me? Hey, just go click here and upload it, and I'll get it. It's no problem. You have download controls. So you can have files in a library and say they're available for download, they're not available for download. And also, you can make it so the person can only read it. They can't actually save it to their disk. They can only see it. They have an Outlook add-in that any time that this is kind of nifty. You send somebody a file with an attachment, or send somebody an email with an attachment. If that attachment is larger than whatever limit you set, let's say 5 megabytes, it will automatically convert the attachment to a shared file and replace the attachment with a link. So you just say send it, boom, it does it in the housekeeping internally, and away it goes. And the uplink page, is the version of that file drop. Bad news about HIGHTAIL: there's no integrated Word, Excel, whatever. They assume you're editing offline, and this is how you share files. It's a higher cost. It's about $12, $15 per user, and there's no workflow. And now, none of the other systems had a workflow either. But sometimes when they're starting to look at these sort of folks are looking at higher-end file sharing systems, they want to know that, you know, I submit a file, it's approved, it's posted, it's shared, and somebody downloaded it, and then they resubmit it. Maybe it's an application process or something. HIGHTAIL does not have workflow, but it's a very nice system. And then SHAREFILE. SHAREFILE is owned by Citrix now. It started off as an independent company, and they bought it. So SHAREFILE is interesting. Like HIGHTAIL, you have unlimited file storage. They don't, for the fee that you are spending, which is about, it averages out, it's kind of funny, but it averages out into about $10, $12 per user, depending on the number of users. It could be as low as $6 per user. Unlimited data storage. SHAREFILE will actually synchronize between your file server and the cloud server. Every other system we've been talking about so far, you're synchronizing from local desktops. So if I'm sharing a file and Carolyn is sharing a file, we have to sync to the same thing, and I edit that file, and let's say it's a 5 megabyte file. I edit it. 5 megabytes goes up to the cloud through my internet pipe, and then 5 megabytes goes down to Carolyn back through the same internet pipe to update her desktop. It's all desktop to desktop. SHAREFILE lets you define shares on a file server. So I can edit that file once on the file server, and the other people in my office, if they don't need to synchronize to their desktops because the file server is synchronizing, and then that saves me bandwidth. So you can do both hosted and local server storage options. And SHAREFILE just has the greatest range of actual file sharing controls way beyond Google and Drop. So it has the file drop. It has the download control. You can actually map drives to SHAREFILE libraries. You can give it a drive S if you want, make it look like it's on another machine. It will do versioning, which means that you can create a policy document and then replace that with a new version. The old version is still kept, but the links don't break because the links get moved to the new version of that file. It will do folder templates. So maybe you create folders for sharing with clients when you start up new projects, and you say, great, create a folder for new client A and use new client template. And that might create 20 different folders for that client, all in a nice hierarchy. Click trails. So it will tell you who clicked on your links, and you can know where, when you've sent shares out, where in the world is this actually going and ending up? Address books, distribution book groups, and also retention policies. So share this file, but only for 60 days, or only for 30 days, or only let the user download it once, or 10 times, or whatever you want. But those kind of retention policies and notifications are in there. And we can share a file with a client and say, here's the instructions for how you do something. Give me a call when you get it. But if you turn the notification on, then once the user actually downloads that file, you've already been notified that they've downloaded it, and you sort of can get ready mentally for when they call you with questions. ShareFile, some cons to ShareFile. For some reason they don't have commenting. Don't know why. Maybe they'll add it. And it is more expensive. So ShareFile starts at $15 a user with a with a 5-user minimum, but after that it's $5 per user. I have the details on that a little later. But it ends up being more expensive certainly than just the $10 a month or the $6 a month that you might pay Dropbox or Microsoft. So then and I apologize, I thought we were going to get this done more quickly, but we're running a little over on time. But I'll just sort of keep going, and then I can share there's some detailed slides coming up with side-by-side comparisons, but I'll flip through those fairly quickly, and anybody that wants can ask Henry for the PDF of the presentation, and we'll share it with you. So OneDrive for Business, though, this is very important, is not OneDrive Personal. It's a different product. Microsoft Office 365 has the option, it comes with OneDrive for Business. And people can use it for synchronizing files. But its real intent was for people who were buying or also opting in to get Microsoft SharePoint as part of their Office 365 plan. So SharePoint is a full workflow calendaring, group communication, library distribution solution. And OneDrive and SharePoint changes how people work. It is not a replacement file server, but it is a replacement collaboration system for an entire company for all your forms and your comments and your organization purposes. And OneDrive for Business is intended to let you flag certain files or libraries that you're working with and synchronize them locally, so it's a little easier to edit these documents and send them back up. But because OneDrive for Business is specifically designed to synchronize with SharePoint data files, it is very picky about the rules and file names that it will let you synchronize. It is not as forgiving as some of the other web engines or web services, because SharePoint is very unforgiving about allowing illegal characters in file names. But that said, OneDrive for Business is a good thing. You just sort of, if you're using it for personal file shares, yeah, you're probably going to run into a few more problems if you're loose about your file naming conventions. But in conjunction with SharePoint, it is a great thing. So just sort of a quick side-by-side, most of these systems do very much the same thing. You know, it's in the, there are differences in file sizes, max file size, you know, 10 gigabit versus 5 terabytes is the biggest size you can have under Google. ShareFile is 100 gigabytes. That's a significant difference. Public shares, synchronizing to your iOS and Android devices, all of them have this. File commenting, all of them have file commenting. File drop, you generally only see that in HIGHTAIL, ShareFile, and OneDrive for Business. And when I say OneDrive for Business, I'm also sort of, if you have OneDrive for Business, then you kind of have SharePoint, so that's kind of how we make that happen. Being able to set up expirations on files, team workspaces, branding, and whether or not they have an application suite are some of the other sort of big differences here on share and file access. Security, basic SSL, two-step authentication is, actually there's an error here. HIGHTAIL does have, no, I take that back. HIGHTAIL does not have two-step authentication, two-factor authentication. Most of these in their business version can do Active Directory integration. They do it to varying degrees of success, but they all technically do it. Whether or not they have client users, only HIGHTAIL and ShareFile and OneDrive for Business really let you set up client users. If you want verification on your users for Dropbox, Google, or OneDrive Personal, they have to have a Microsoft or a Google or a Dropbox account, which, you know, they can sign up for free. They can use their free account. But they have to have signed up with those companies to be able to do that. Remote Wipe, generally speaking, is available on the business class products. Not everybody does password protection. Pretty much everybody except for OneDrive Personal does virus scanning. Tracking options, this is where you start to see some significant difference with regards to the levels of audit controls, setting user levels and permissions, file check-in, check-out. Everybody's got full text search, and that recipient identity verification, again there, that sort of varies based on what system you're on. The notifications up here, that's again basically telling you that somebody received the invitation, somebody actually downloaded the file, somebody downloaded the file again, somebody sent you a file. Those kinds of things are nice to have for some companies. Other folks don't care so much about them. And then, there's the what does it cost, and I personally think that this should sort of be the last thing you look at, but it's good to know. So these are not the free plans. So I'm just starting at the professional or the personal level plans. So basically, Dropbox starts at $10 for 1 terabyte of storage. Google starts at $5 for 15 gigabytes. Once you get up to 1 terabyte of storage, they'll charge you $10 also. These are monthly charges. OneDrive Personal starts at $7 a month. Basically, they want you, I think it's 60, 75 bucks, or maybe I'm sorry, it's like 90 bucks for 1 year, and you get the full Office suite, and OneDrive comes with it. HIGHTAIL, it's basically, the personal plan is $15 a month. They won't quote, they don't publish, sorry, a business subscription plan, but it's basically, it's because it's a volume-based thing. It could be as low as $5 a month if you had a couple of hundred users. If you're talking less than 10 users, then it's probably going to be closer to the $10 or $12 price. SharePoint is $20 per user for the first 5. So if you get into SharePoint, I'm sorry, not SharePoint, ShareFile, it's going to be a minimum of $100 a month, whether you have 5 or not. And then if you have more than 5, it's only $5 a month additional. So that's just how they've priced that. There is a personal subscription plan that they'll do for $100. I'm sorry, for $16. And then OneDrive for Business, so the least expensive OneDrive plan, Office 365 plan that is email with OneDrive is $8.25 a month, and that can go up to $20 a month to include basically every product that Microsoft licenses. So that there's some variability there. But again, OneDrive Business is more of an ancillary product for working with SharePoint, and it's not quite the same thing as OneDrive Personal. If all you're wanting to do is share some files between your desktop PC and your home PC, and occasionally share something out to somebody else, and you want to be in the Microsoft world, you might be better. You might be better off doing OneDrive Personal. But if you have a 365 account, go ahead and use OneDrive for Business, but just know that you're going to have to be careful about your file naming conventions. So general recommendations, and we're wrapping up here. Dropbox, I think it's great for individuals and small businesses that aren't concerned that much about security, don't want an app suite built in, and they're sharing files occasionally, and they don't have security or compliance issues. It's not because Dropbox itself isn't secure. The stuff you store there I think is perfectly secure, but as soon as you start sharing out links, A, you don't know where they're going to go, and B, unless you have the business account, it's in somebody else's name, and you have no real control about it. Google Drive, it's basically, to me, it's pretty close to Dropbox with the addition of the apps. And if you are a Google Drive shop, then and you don't have the security issues, then that's great. But if you are more of a Microsoft house, then yeah, the apps kind of get in the way a little bit, but you can still do it. OneDrive to me is acceptable, and it has gotten a lot better in the last year. And Microsoft says that they're still not done with it. And all of these companies are in hot competition. Somebody has a feature, somebody else has the same feature, and they're trying to basically duke it out because Microsoft knows they need to compete against Google and Dropbox. HIGHTAIL is an actual file sharing application. That's what it does. So for organizations that need professional, they've got libraries they need to share, they want to share out large disk images, video files, they want control over them, they want an administrator who can limit what users are doing and know what they're sharing out. HIGHTAIL is a nice web-based solution to that. And then SHAREFILE is of this group is to me the most powerful of the sharing applications for companies and professionals that really they need to be compliant for some reason, or they just want good controls and good features over the files that they're sharing out. It's not a casual thing. It's, this is part of our business model. This is what we do, so it needs to be controlled. And then OneDrive for Business, as I said, is not so much a general file sharing app, although it does that. It's really more of a SharePoint file sync. How did I end up with that? Oh, here we go. Okay, so wrap up. Sorry, I lost track of what slide I was on. File sharing, though, is part of the business environment today, and you need to accommodate it, either for user mobility or for customers and vendors. Somebody in your organization already is. You probably are. And I would suggest that you do give some thought to organizing it so it's not just the Wild West. Do think about what sharing means to your organization. If a link was misshared and or got out, is that a problem for you in terms of confidential information? Is it just for internal staff, or is it potentially for customers, vendors? Do you have security or compliance needs? How many people need to use it? How many individual people need to share stuff out? Because if you don't provide it, they'll do it themselves. And then the other part is, are you only looking to share? Just make sure that you're only looking to share and not looking to also improve workflow and processes. That's what SharePoint and some other systems do very well. SharePoint, Huddle, a couple of the other good ones. Because file sharing may be part of your solution, but there may be a bigger thing that needs to be addressed. And again, that last thing is, if your objective is actually to move your file server to the cloud, then do that. But don't think that file sharing necessarily is going to be the same thing. So if you like the idea of having centralized files, not spread out all over the place on lots of different computers with actual file lock access control, so you know the last person that edited it and when it was edited, and there aren't lots of versions all over the place. Yeah, file server may be exactly what you need. See, when you turn off access to the file server, someone no longer has access to that file. Apologies for running a little bit over. I obviously underestimated how much time I was going to talk. If folks are still out there, looks like some of you hung in with me to the end. Any questions? Henry, you want to open up the phone lines or see if anybody's got any questions?
Okay,
you still there, Henry? Thanks, Henry.
Yes, the lines are open. Yeah, thanks.
So anybody have any questions or comments, your own experiences with these systems or services? There is a bit of personal preference that goes on in here based on what your own experiences and what kind of data you're trying to synchronize. James, are you still on the line? James Mays? Maybe not. Maybe I lost James there.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're there. You have anything you want to add? You work with these things every day.
I think the only thing to add is that these things exist in your organization whether you know about them or not, and so the more you can get a handle on providing one that is something that you control, or at least understanding what's already out there. But this is shadow IT as they describe it. Everybody's got one of these accounts already that they have your data in, so get a handle on that as quickly as possible so you understand what people are using, and then work with the people in your company to pick one that everybody likes and can all agree on.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And so in my mind, there's sort of three things that can happen here. One is that it is possible to block services through your company, certain services through your company firewall. That becomes a game of whack-a-mole, because as soon as you turn off access to DROPBOX, then someone will start using Google, because all these things have slightly different ports and or access methods that they use that can be blocked, but they block pretty much one at a time. So you can try to stop it, and kind of like life and chaos, they will proliferate and they'll just move someplace else or use another service. Two, you can issue a policy statement, so at least it's on paper that people are not supposed to do this, knowing that, yeah, in reality they probably are. And then the third option and I'm not saying this is better, but I'm just saying the third option is to actually provide a corporate-based alternative that you at least have some visibility to and or some control over. Anybody else have anything that they want to add?
I just want to say thank you, man. This is very informative. My company currently is using Google Pro for nonprofits or Google Apps for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some file servers as well, but we're just trying to kind of get a streamlined system for file sharing within the company, but also outside. And that's exactly what was happening. The people sharing stuff outside, sensitive information, and like you say, anybody has access to it, can edit it, and we just kind of want to kind of get some policies and procedures around file sharing here at the company. And I was thinking Google is probably the best one, but now looking, at your presentation, I'm like, wow, should we be using the Citrix one? Should we be using, something else? So it's definitely good information to take back to management.
Yeah, and there are companies, in fact many companies, that end up using both, where Google may be allowed for personal synchronization of data and or for highly trusted users to share occasional files, but that the primary, the public-facing stuff is done through some other sort of a controlled medium.
Yeah.
And that it's policy that users do not share unapproved documents from their drive folders, without permission.
Yeah, I'm actually putting together policy and procedures right now, so just hearing that just reminds me to include that. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing to know is that ShareFile, or just to remember, ShareFile and HIGHTAIL, and other services as well, they do have the same desktop sync option that Google Drive has and DROPBOX and OneDrive. So they do that as well. They're not just, it's just on the sharing side of it, you got way more options.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
But if you like Google Docs, then you're going to be living in Google land for a while anyway, though. That's not going to go away.
Yeah, I don't think most people don't like to use it. They're so Microsoft. I mean, even though you can save stuff in Google Drive, that's Office documents, as soon as something opens up in Docs or Sheets, they're like, wait, what is this? I don't like it. Well, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is, and I agree with you. And there's a point at which, in some versions of the latest version of Microsoft, I've finally come to the conclusion that Google Docs is actually better at this point until Microsoft fixes some of their bugs and some of the stuff that they've done.
Oh, okay.
It's way competitive now. Yeah. All right. Any other comments or feedback? So I haven't looked at this calendar recently, but I believe that our next webinar is in about a month, and that's going to be talking more actually about Office 365 and SharePoint. If I'm not wrong, Henry. But we will. You'll get an invite to that, and hopefully some of you can enjoy that. And appreciate your time today. Thank you all very much.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
All right. We'll go ahead and sign off. Have a great day.